Let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, Master of heaven and earth, strengthen us by your word and by all you have done for us. Keep us eager and joyful for your work, even in difficult and troubled days. Grant us unfailing trust, faith in you, and remind us of your grace and enable us to show grace to others. You are our God and our Father, and you will never forsake us. We pray this in your name. Amen. Just a couple things before we get to the parable of the compassionate master. We were talking, I think most of you heard this, but not everyone. So 2 weeks from now is the Congregational Meeting, so we won't have class. And next week's going to be the end of parables. So if you want to go do something else, you will not hurt my feelings if you don't come back. But what we're going to do then, the Sunday after Thanksgiving is the beginning of Advent. So we're going to do 4 weeks on like Bible passages tied up with Advent. And then we get to Christmas. I'm not here for most of January, but then towards the end of January we'll start up again, and topic is to be determined, so pay attention to your church emails and those things. Okay, so you have a handout. Everybody have it? I think so.
Yes. Question?
Yes, sir. Ma'am. Sorry.
Will these be on videos? Since I'll be in California, will I be able
I think
to
so.
watch it?
I think it's.
I think we finally got it.
I think they finally figured it out. So I am not the
first few
technology
videos
master,
are
so I
kind of
just
shaky. But
stand here and talk.
Well, the other thing is whether you can get it.
Right.
Is it going to be live, or will you put it on the site later?
They're recorded.
it'll be on the website and on.
But later,
Yeah.
like during the week.
Sally uploads them somewhere.
I think they're already there. I've not watched them. I absolutely hate watching myself on video. I hate it. But
Not about you, but
I know. I don't like
that's
it.
one reason we're tired of Zoom.
I'll have a better answer for you next week. How's that?
Okay, so I'm just. Is anyone going to the 11 a.m. service? Bob is. Okay. Well, Bob, you're out. I'm gonna.
Yeah,
If anybody
as long as you want.
needs to leave, but because we got a very late start, I might go over. But you're free to leave whenever you need to.
Oh my goodness.
Well, it was communion and all the saints and all that. So, okay, so this parable is usually titled something like the parable of the workers in the vineyard. That's the focus, right? It's not. The focus is on the master or the landowner, whatever we want to call this person. Right? So I call it the parable of the compassionate. A master, I have seen it titled the parable of the generous employer, because this is what the focus is on. This character is obviously an analogy for God. This is who this person stands in for. God is like this. And he's a lot like the father in the parable of the prodigal son, which is also mistitled. It's the parable of the compassionate father. So the emphasis is on these characters who are analogies for us for God. God is like these people. So I'm actually going to make a couple of times some comparisons to the parable of the prodigal son. So that's who that character is. What we need to kind of ask ourselves as we read the parable is, who are these workers? And there's a whole bunch of them. Right? So I'm going to read the parable. If you see what I've done in my handout, I've kind of shown how there's parallels. This is a typical Jewish or Hebrew way of doing things, where in a certain sense the point comes in the middle, and then it gets repeated again at the end, and you can see how there's these parallels. So I've numbered them A, B, C. The D is the middle, and then it kind of goes backwards again with a C1, B1, A1, with the same things happening in all those parallels, right? This is again not a Western way of like ordering things. It's a typical Jewish way. The Old Testament does this constantly. If you read the prophets or you read the Psalms, you can outline almost all of them this way. It's what they do. So I'm just pointing out that this is the structure. So I'm going to read the parable. So Jesus tells this parable. For the kingdom of heaven is like a master who went out first thing in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. After coming to an agreement with the workers for the usual denarius, he sent them to his vineyard. So I'm going to pause there. A couple of things. First, we get this word denarius. The NRSV, which is our Pew Bible, it's the translation of the pews, translates this the usual daily wage, which is accurate, but this is also a coin. So it's a silver coin. It's kind of the standard idea of this is what a worker gets every day. We actually know that about 40, 50 years earlier than this parable, Julius Caesar agreed to pay soldiers in the Roman army, the basic soldier, 225 denarii a year. So it's basically a low wage person makes this on average every workday. Right? This probably isn't what these hired workers usually get paid. This master is incredibly generous, actually, giving them a little bit more. Right? Because these are basically unemployed people who can't find a job, and they're standing around in the town market trying to get hired. They're day laborers. So if you've been to the Middle East, you can actually still see this everywhere. Happens here too. I mean, usually this is, how to put this, Hispanic workers without papers who are trying to get a job, and they want to get hired because the employers want to hire them because they don't have to pay taxes, they don't have to pay benefits, and it's kind of the same idea here. These are people who are down and out who desperately need a job, and they're standing there eager to have someone hire them to basically do labor, right? The yard work, the farm work, these kinds of things. This is who they are. So he goes out early in the morning. Text says, first thing in the morning. He goes out again about 9 o'clock. The third hour, so mid-morning or so. Right? These hours are technical, but they're important. I mean, this is the ancient world. The workday starts, so you are in the field working as soon as you can see. Right? So you're actually outside waiting to get hired even earlier. The goal is you get out in the field like 6 a.m. Right? And you work until it's dark. Right? So when we're going to see them come to the 11th hour, that's the idea of, it's about 5 o'clock, the sun sets at 6. Workday is 6 to 6, right? By the way, the phrase the 11th hour that we use all the time, things are almost over, it's the 11th hour, comes from this parable. That's where we get that. Let's say. So it's entered the English language from this parable, right? So he goes out about the third hour, sees others still standing there unemployed, and says to them, you also go out to the vineyard, and I will give you whatever is just. So notice how this works. He makes a contract with the first people he hires. They negotiate salary, and they agree on a very generous but fair price of a denarius a day. Right? So this is what they do. And he tells these other ones, I'll pay you what's just. So they probably were there when the first workers got hired, so they're like, okay, maybe we'll get 80%. A good deal. I can go home tonight and my wife's not going to be angry with me. I got paid. right? He keeps doing this. This is very odd. I want to point out to you how strange this is. Like, this is a master, so this is a technical term too. This is the guy who's the head of the household. He's like a lord on a big English estate. He's not usually the one who hires people. He's got a person to do this, right? He doesn't get his hands dirty. He's not the one working in the field. He owns a big portion of property. It's like a big corporate farm. He hires employees. It's probably harvest season. He needs extra workers. He should have a hired hand, a manager who does this. A steward is actually the technical term, who shows up halfway through. Why the steward isn't doing this all along, this is strange. So this is one of these cultural details that we might not catch, but Jesus' audience is going to go, wait a minute, why would the master of the house be doing this? Why isn't the steward doing it? And then the steward all of a sudden appears halfway through. Right? I mean, we can think about some big corporation. The owner of the company isn't the one who usually hires people. That's what's happening here. In fact, he's going to a marketplace and hiring them off the street. It's odd, right? So he keeps doing this. He does it at noon. He does it at 3 p.m. Very strange, right? I mean, he almost comes off at first as inept. Doesn't he know how many workers he needs? Why does he keep going out and hiring more? Is he young? Is he inexperienced? Doesn't know what he's doing, right? These are details that when Jesus' audience heard them, they would be going like, what is going on here? This is strange. This is not how this usually works. People don't get hired in the middle of the day for one day a job. Right? He does it again at the end of the day. Goes out there at the 11th hour, right? It's already kind of starting to get dark. He finds people still standing there and says to them, why do you stand here unemployed all day? And they say to him, because no one has hired us. So these little dialogues are important. These aren't lazy people who are just kind of, I'm not doing anything. They're actually actively seeking a job. They cannot find one. No one has been there to hire them. Right? So he says, okay, you go too. So I think implied in here is he's been telling them, I'll pay you a just wage. Right? Everybody's expecting, well, the first group, because they were there when they got hired, they're all standing in this same area in town, right? The first group, right, they got paid a denarius. We're going to get paid a percentage, right? Well, that's not what happens, right? What happens is he comes and all of a sudden he says to his steward, where's this guy been all day? We don't know. He says, call the workers and give them the wage. That's literally what the Greek text says. Give them the wage, right? Which is this agreed upon wage of earlier. So it says, call all the workers, give them all of the wage, and pay the ones who got hired last first, and then call them up. This is odd, right? None of this is a normal or a good way of doing things. So when the first group came, they finally got up there, right? You can think of they're waiting to get paid. They're still on the clock, going like, I want to get home, I want to eat dinner, right? They're the last, and you can just almost imagine how this worked. They saw the group that got hired only an hour ago get paid the full wage. They're like, oh, what are we going to get paid, right? We're going to get more. That's the idea. Right? And of course, they see that group go up, and then the next group go up, and the next group go up, and the next group, there's actually 4 groups ahead of them, all getting paid the same, and their excitement from going, we're going to get a huge paycheck, to we're going to get paid exactly what everybody else got paid, and yet we worked all day. Their excitement goes to sort of being sad to getting angry, right? It actually makes sense. It's actually how I feel when I read this story. I'm kind of like, this is not fair, right?
Well, what you have to realize, the overriding idea is that this is a story.
Right, no, I mean, it's,
Meant to tell us something.
right, no, exactly, like, I mean, this is actually, it almost branches into the unbelievable. This is a real thing,
Yeah.
right? Because you can just see everybody getting, oh, that's that. It's supposed to make us think this way. It's supposed to challenge us, right? So the first game came, they received the denarius. When they received it, they were grumbling, and then one of them gets up and says, "These last worked 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day in the scorching heat." And then the master replies. He says, I think most of our translations say something like "friend." The Greek term here is actually, it's a technical term that you use to address someone that you don't know. So a mild way of doing this would be simply to say, "Sir," like, "Excuse me, sir, you've dropped your wallet."
So is this your word?
This is my word, because I think it's got an edge to it. It's got a bit of an edge. It's like, it's not just, "Sir, excuse me, sir," it's, "Hey, buddy."
Hey, buddy.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of trying to capture what's happening here, right? He says, "Hey, buddy, do you know in justice, did you not come to an agreement on me for a denarius? We had a contract. I'm honoring it. I'm paying you exactly what we agreed on. Take what's yours and go. I choose to give to these last, the same as I give to you, or am I not allowed to do what I choose with what's mine? Or is your eye evil because I am good? Thus the last will be first, and the first last." Right? So that's what we, again, that's the story. Right? So if you look at my handout on the back page, I've highlighted some things, and I've kind of been highlighting them as we went, but there are several things here that shock and surprise. They just kind of pop out of, this is unusual, odd, maybe not very smart, right? So first he hires people throughout the day. Nobody does this, right? Nobody does this back then, nobody does it now, right? You go to the marketplace, you say, "I need this many people to do this project, I'm gonna hire them. I need 10, I'm gonna hire 10, right? This guy, I mean, he's a master of the house. He's got other things to do than to keep going back to town all the time. And he goes 5 times, right? I mean, it's not like he's in a car. He's walking probably at least a mile or 2. He goes back, he hires more people, right? What's he doing, right? Again, he should have a person do this before. There's of course, the big surprise is everybody gets paid the same wage, right? We get the steward who appears, right? A couple other things. The other two I'm going to highlight in more detail. So, right, I want to kind of walk us through this again, sort of scene by scene, right? So this guy goes to the marketplace very early, right? Finds some workers, contracts with them, tells them to go work in his vineyard. Notice he doesn't walk them there. He doesn't go with them. So I think we should assume they know who he is. They're all in some kind of a village. They know him by reputation. They probably worked for him before, maybe. Right? So they go to the vineyard and start working. That must be where the steward is. He's there kind of supervising. Right? So this is what happens. Right? Scene 2. B, he returns. Why? We're not told. Right? He still sees people looking for work. They probably come up to him. This is how this usually works. You've got a group of people, usually younger men, desperate for a job. They see the employer coming up. They are going to rush out to meet him. They're eager to come in. All these people are depicted as eager to find work. Right? They're standing, notice. All of them stand. They're not sitting. Right, so he goes and sees some people who don't have work. He chooses more. He tells them he'll pay them a just wage. Right, again, there's no negotiating. He says, go to work. Right. But there's still this puzzle of what's he doing? Why is he here? Right. So I'm going to entertain a different possibility here, especially if this master, which I think is clear, is kind of a God character. Right? He's supposed to be merciful and compassionate. That's what he's doing. He keeps going back to hire people, right? Because he knows there's all these guys who need a job. Right? The context of this in Jesus' time is probably pretty accurate. Of about 100 years earlier, the Romans conquered the whole area. They've slowly been kind of gobbling up land. So 2 generations earlier, most of these workers could probably have their own little plot in a farm. That's no longer feasible. Now to make any money as a farmer, you need a big farm for it to be profitable. Not unlike now, right? And so these guys need a job, and they can't find one. The economy isn't doing well. This guy's intentionally going out and hiring people, right? So he keeps going back. Why does he keep going back? I'm going to speculate that he's encouraging the people who are still there. Stay here. Keep trying. Somebody's going to hire you. There are other people in town that need work. And he keeps coming back, and no one's hired them. So he hires another group, encourages the others, stay here. Keep it up. Right? Otherwise, why would they stay? I mean, if you've seen this kind of thing before, where there's guys who stand on the street looking for a job, they're gone by mid-morning, maybe noon. No one's still there at 5. There's no point. No one's going to hire you. So why are they staying? Either they're not quite right in the head, or they've been encouraged to stay. We have to read some things into what's happening here, right? So he keeps going back. He's encouraging them. He keeps hiring them. Tells them other people. I'm talking to other guys who own property. That's what he's doing in between. Can you go hire some people, right? In this sense, I mean, he really is a parallel to Jesus himself, who is God with us, right? God becomes a human being and works for us, right? We'll come back to this, right? Each time he comes, he tells them he'll pay them a just wage, right? So these aren't just lazy people. They're people who can't find a job, and he's trying to help them. Right? Again, look what happens when he asks the last men why they haven't given up and gone home. They say, because no one has hired us. So they've got some kind of a hope that things are going to work out, right? So if I put myself in this story, I think, well, why does he even bother to hire them? If I had the resources, and this is what I was doing, I would say, well, guys, it's 5 o'clock. Here's a denarius. Don't tell anybody I just gave it to you for free, or I'll never get workers again. Go home. Yeah.
You also think the guy who was hired first is mad. So tomorrow he'll come and
Exactly. I'm going to come back to that. There's a whole bunch of problems here. This is not a smart thing to do. Right? And we'll get to this in just a minute. But I think that's what he's doing. He could have easily done that, but he doesn't. Part of the mercy and compassion is to give them the dignity of having a job. It's not just a handout. It's only in hour, but at least you can come work and do something and go home proud. Right? So the mercy and compassion isn't only that you need the money, it's the dignity. Right? And they probably only expect they're going to get a few pennies, maybe enough to buy a meal for their family that night. There's no expectation here they're going to get the full salary, but at least he gives them a job, right? They've got something. So then the end of the day comes, right? The first group, those who were hired very early, they have a contract, right? They're getting paid a very fair wage. It's above market value. It's also not outlandish. But they would expect to get paid first. That's actually the normal way. You'd hire out the first hired people first if you did hire this way, right? So why does he do what he does? So in scene 4, D, we get a series of surprises. The steward shows up. He's been told by the master to pay them. They don't know he's been told to pay the wage. We do, right? So the first group probably works their way up to the front expecting to get paid first. And they're not. Right? The last group gets called up and they get the full pay. And so again, there's this experience of, oh my goodness, are we going to get paid more? Slowly it dawns on them, oh no. Right? This is just not smart. Let's say the guy wants to be generous and compassionate. If I was doing this, I'd be like, okay, I'll pay the first group first. They'll get their paycheck. They'll leave. Then I'll pay the next group. Don't tell them I paid you the full price, right? I would do that with every group. That way, no one gets angry. Doesn't make any sense.
Well, but isn't it a parallel to
No, but I
something
mean,
else?
this is exactly right. I mean, somehow he wants them to know. This is what he's doing. He wants everybody there to know I'm generous and compassionate and showing mercy, right? He wants them to see what is happening. It's the only way of explaining this. Otherwise, it's a bad decision. I had the same thought that you did, which was, I mean, clearly this first group gets angry. What's going to happen tomorrow? He's going to go to the market tomorrow. Is anybody going to be there?
Not at it.
Right? Are they all going to show up at the 11th hour and hope to get paid?
Or maybe hoping 2 dinners.
Right? Yeah, right. I mean, and I think the part of the reversal here is it's like the youngest son in the parable of the prodigal son, right? You're so thankful that this has been done to you that they're probably the ones who show up super early and they're like, I'm gonna work today. I'll come work for you, even if you don't need anybody. I mean, you could pay me a whole day. There's some thankfulness happening, right? Yep.
So if I were one of the workers, and I would be like, well, why should I show up early?
Right.
Well, I can answer that. I would show up early because the rules might change.
Right.
He might say, oh,
Today I'm going to do
most
this.
Well, and I mean-
today we're not doing it that way.
Again, I think we should read these kind of parables and put ourselves in the heads of all the different characters. And so, like, when I was trying to do this week, I thought, if I'm in this final group that's hired, my thoughts are going to be, I'm going to get enough payment today to go buy a bread and a cheese to bring home at the end of the day. So at least my family eats. These are dirt poor people, right? I don't have to be humiliated by going home with nothing, right? I would think that. Or maybe I don't get paid anything. Maybe this is a test. Will I come work hard for an hour, and at the end of the day he'll say, well, you only worked for an hour, I'm not going to pay you, but come back tomorrow. And that's actually what that's what I would think is they're probably thinking. The big surprise, I mean, we've heard this parable so many times it doesn't shock us, but it ought to. He pays everybody the same pay. It's not a normal thing to do, anywhere, anytime.
Well, I'm thinking about the guys in the middle.
Right?
What about the guys in the middle? You know, they're kind of going, well,
Well, but I mean, that's the whole issue. Is like what he does creates tension. You can almost feel it in the story of at least pay the first group first, right? If you want to be this generous, there's a better way to do this. And so he doesn't. He creates tension. I think he somehow wants them to know what's happened, right? What he's up to, right? So then we get the third scene in which there's all this conflict, right? He wants them, and this does it messes with our sense of justice, equal pay for equal work. It isn't fair. It's part of the point. Jesus is saying this isn't how the kingdom of God works. The world might work this way, but it's not how the kingdom of God works. Your sense of fairness isn't what God's sense of fairness is. God gives to everyone, right? It's a grace all the way down. Even the first group hired, the fact that they got a job early in the morning is grace. Yes, they had to work all day, but that's what they wanted. They wanted a job. Right? And everybody wants a job. And everybody is given a fair rate of pay. No one here is made rich. Right? And everybody is given a dignity. This is the first century. It's all men who are working. All of them get to go home tonight to their wife and to their kids and say, look, I'm not a loser. I got a paycheck. Right?
I keep thinking about, Jesus on the cross and the two
Yeah.
thieves,
Oh, absolutely.
that's where I'm at.
Right. I mean, it's
And I think, this is so relevant to me because this is one of the hardest things for me is, as a Christian, as I try to be a Christian, is, people who live their life clean, following Christ's work,
Yep.
following Christ's words for their whole life have just as much grace as the person who screws up for their entire life and the 2 days before they pass, they ask for Christ's forgiveness. That is the hardest thing for me, and so it just homes right home.
and I think that's exactly the message here of
Yeah,
this is the way
so hard.
God works, right? And it doesn't seem fair to us. But I mean, we'll come back to that. This is the context, right? So then they basically elect a spokesperson to sort of stand up to him and say, this isn't fair. Because we're actually told one person speaks up, right? And what does he say? You made them equal to us, but we worked all day. This is just like the older son in the parable of the prodigal who says, I stayed here, I was faithful, I followed all of your rules, I worked for you. You wouldn't even give me a fatted calf so I could have a party with my friends. Same message. He's not thankful for what has been given to him. He now thinks he's been ripped off when he got exactly what he contracted for. They've been given everything, right? They're being treated fairly. So this isn't a complaint of the underpaid. It's rather they're complaining that according to their own standards, everybody else has been overpaid. Everybody's been given the same thing, regardless of how hard they worked, right? That's where I think it isn't fair, right?
The scripture today.
I wasn't there.
Well, it's about the sinner lady that comes to the meal with Jesus at the Pharisees' house,
Yeah.
Same idea.
Exactly. Right. And that's actually one way to think of this parable. I mean, what's the context of where's Jesus telling this? I mean, I really think there's a group of Pharisees around, and they're angry with him. Why? Because Jesus is going and eating with sinners and tax collectors, right? And the Pharisees are supposed to stand in for the first group hired. Why? They've been faithful. They've obeyed all of the Old Testament law. They're keeping themselves pure. They're doing all the right things. And Jesus comes saying, God will forgive all of these sinners. And not only just forgive them and welcome them back, but they just get incorporated back in. They're made equal. Everybody's equal. The grace applies to everything. And they're angry. So are we. I think part of this is you need to ask yourself, or we all need to ask ourselves, which group are we?
It always amazes me. Jesus was so wise, that he was able to put all this stuff into all these parables
Yeah.
that we don't really understand them totally always, but we study.
Or we don't agree with them once we do understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's. I mean, I think the interest. How does the parable end? I mean, he says, "Are you?" What does he say? It's something about evil eyes. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what's mine, or is your eye evil because I'm good? Most of our translations kind of like don't do this literally, but it's an important phrase because it's the evil eye is: are you jealous? Are you angry? Because I'm giving other people grace. That seems more than what you've received, right? I mean, it's really the idea of you want things to be equal. So you worked harder and longer, therefore you should get more. And the whole point is that's
Should be
not
more equal.
it's not how it works, right? I mean, this is really. I mean, and what does the master say? He says, "Take what's yours and go." I mean, he's kind of kicking them out. I don't think these guys are getting hired tomorrow.
So tomorrow morning,
You know, I mean, it's if we keep, though this parable comes from Matthew, 2 chapters after this, Jesus will tell the parable of the great banquet in which a person comes in who isn't dressed for the wedding,
Right.
and they get tossed out
Yeah.
into weeping and gnashing of teeth, which I don't think is hell. I don't think we should need to immediately go to hell, like eternal torment. It's you're going to get thrown out of the kingdom of God in this sort of divine economy, which doesn't play by the rules that we expect. Rather, it's justice involves mercy and compassion. So those who are down get more. They're brought up. So everybody's made on the same plane, right? We don't like this. It just instinctively goes against everything, right? Notice this is not an economic plan, right? But it really is saying this is how Christians ought to treat everyone, right? If we keep reading in the Bible, we get to Acts chapter 2. There's these first converts, chapters 2 through 4, and what do they start doing? They start sharing resources. The early church is one in which they're actually seen to be pooling all of their wealth, right? Radical, how would we pull that off? We instantly go to, what about people who are lazy, who aren't going to work, right? And there's a couple things happening even here, which is one, notice all of the people who get hired are all trying to find a job. They're not taking advantage of the